All right. Hopefully we're live.
Is waiting for Chris.
Do you know if we're good to go?
Are we live?
We got one
Yes.
viewer.
It's Kimberly.
Oh, awesome. All right. Well, we're live and welcome everybody. This is Ask a Plumber Live. You ask me about the weird sounds, drips, water bills, water heaters, anything plumbing related, any should I be worried questions, and I'm here to help you understand your plumbing before it becomes an emergency. All right, so in the beginning here, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background on me. I've been plumbing for about 7 years now. I'm in Central North Carolina is where I'm at. I'm also the owner of Poseidon Plumbing. We're based out in Mebane, and we also have an office in Raleigh. So if you're local to our area, give us a call. We can come out there and take care of any plumbing issues you might have. My guest here today is Bo McKenzie. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, so I'm Bo McKenzie, and I've built and sold a couple of plumbing businesses over the years. Been a plumber now for, 22, 23 years. But so been around that for a while, and then the building businesses side of it as well, and then coaching and consulting and teaching others how to build their businesses. And yeah, so been around the industry for quite a long time, and in a few areas of it.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I'm excited to have you on the show today. And let me pull up these comments. Hey, just so everybody knows, this is the first time I've gone live on anything like this. So there's going to be a little bit of friction, but hey, we're doing it live. We're going to work through it and we'll get it figured out. So just put your comments in on the YouTube stream. I know for a fact I'll get the comments from YouTube. I'm not sure if I'll get the ones from Facebook. I can't look at two different screens right now. I don't have that set up. But if you just put your questions in there on the YouTube live stream and we'll answer them for you. Also, if you want to join as an actual live caller, we can make that happen for you. I just got to get the link over to you. So let's see. If you send us a message on Facebook and we can get you on the show. I will send you a link. So just message me on Facebook Messenger and I'll send you a link and you can get on the show and you can ask your question like that. Sometimes it's easier, asking a question in the chat is going to be nice, but we might need a lot more information to really be able to get you a good answer on what might be going on with your plumbing system. So getting you on the show would be really cool. We can ask a lot more questions and really get you dialed in. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is plumbing problems that homeowners should not ignore. Okay, so tonight we're going to be talking about high water pressure. So drop your questions in the comments about any high water pressure questions you might have, and we'll help you out. High water pressure, it feels great in the shower. Everybody loves high water pressure. But the problem is it slowly and quietly destroys your plumbing fixtures and your plumbing systems. It's not good. Anything over 80 PSI is actually a major problem and is required by code that we have to fix that and bring it below 80. Once you start getting above 70, then you actually start voiding warranties and stuff. So let's say we come to your
UPC and UL listing. UPC and UL listing is designed for 68 PSI. I don't know where 68 came from, but that's the design pressure that everything has to be UPC and UL listed.
Okay. And is that basically what all of the warranties are going to, like basically 69 PSI, is that going to start voiding warranties on things?
Well, it's not that so much as when they get listed for code purposes and for UL listing, which is, the uniform laboratories and all that, the 68 PSI is the target. So when they're testing different things, they're testing them at 68 PSI. Don't ask me where
Okay.
that number came from. That's a very odd number if you ask me, but yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, so Luke just dropped a comment on Facebook. So it looks like I am seeing the Facebook comments. That's cool.
Sweet.
How can I test my water pressure in my home? So if you go to your local hardware store, Lowe's, Home Depot, they have a little gauge that you can put on your outdoor spigot. Just
And it's
screw it
cheap.
on there.
It's not expensive.
Yeah, they're super cheap. In fact, cheap is the right word, because if once they get old, they're not great at reading pressure. But if you get a brand new one, it should be totally dialed in.
Mm-hmm.
Just put that thing on your outdoor spigot, turn it on, and it'll show you what your pressure is. Anything over 70, I would be a little bit concerned about that. Anything over 80, you definitely want to call a plumber as soon as possible and get that fixed. So that answers the other question that's in the chat on how do you know what your PSI is. So yeah, you just want to go get one of those gauges, put it on your outdoor spigot, turn it on. You want to make sure there's a little bit of, all right, so there's a thing called a pressure reducing valve. All right, if you're on city water, it's a PRV. And what it does is the city water pressure is usually really high, especially depending on where you're at in the water system.
Yeah.
So the very first thing that the water, when it leaves the city water and comes into your home, it goes through a PRV and it bumps that pressure back down to around 65, 70 PSI so that you're not stressing your plumbing systems.
Yeah, and some of the failures that you'll see from high water pressure, you're going to see like your rubber seals, you'll get blow by on them, so water will actually continue by them. If it's really high, you can actually start washing the back end of your 90s, so 90-degree angles within, whether it be within a faucet or within your hard pipes like copper or brass or galvanized or any of those. You'll, so the back end of that 90, they'll get what's called washing, which is where when the water comes around the 90, it actually creates a little turbulence, and it will wash right through the back end of it over time, obviously, but it'll wash through the back end of it. But then we also see water heater failures from it, toilet fill valve failures. We see failures on faucets and angle stops. The angle stops are little shutoffs that are underneath your toilet and your faucets. You see failures on all those types of things because it's just so much turbulence, and especially if you have sediment in your water, it'll actually like sandblast the inside of the pipe.
Yeah, definitely. Fill valves in toilets, you mentioned. Yeah, what they'll do is they're really hard to pinpoint because it just weeps through the fill valve. So you don't actually hear your toilet running, but it is letting a little bit of water through.
Just it can't shut off all the way. There's too much pressure for
yeah,
it.
Yeah, definitely. And so for the PRV, if you tested your spigot and you're getting like 100 PSI or something, definitely want to be concerned, but make sure you're testing before the PRV. If you're on a crawl space, you could probably verify this. There is some scenarios where spigots are tied in before the PRV, and it can give you an inflated pressure. That spigot is going to be high pressure, but that doesn't necessarily mean the rest of your house is. But again, it's probably just the thing where call your local plumber if you are testing high pressure and just get it looked at by a professional, and they'll let you know and get you squared away for it. Yeah, another thing, so obviously it's going to cause pinhole leaks like Bo was talking about, pinhole leaks on copper lines and 90s, fill valves. Another cool thing that you can put on your house, and this will kind of tell you if you have a leak, is called a Moen flow automatic shutoff valve. So one, they're great because if you pop a leak in your home, especially if you're not home and you're not there to be able to see the water pouring down from your attic or spewing out from a toilet supply line, it'll automatically shut the water off, and it'll actually alert your phone. So that's something that I would highly recommend getting if you're worried about any leaks or anything. But also, let's say your toilet fill valves are leaking sometimes it's hard to know if you have a slow leak, and a system like a mow and flow, it can pinpoint that and it'll let
They'll
you know.
catch them for you. Yeah. The other thing that we see quite often with these high water pressure is in these modern systems like tankless water heaters and all that, where they've got a lot of computers in them. Some of them are starting to be kind of sensitive to higher water pressures, the computers and sensors.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of gizmos and gadgets on these new water heating systems. They're
Gizmos and
great.
gadgets is the right words.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that there's even it has a little turbine in there so that it can sense how fast the water is moving through there. And yeah, if the water pressure is way off, that's not going to be working properly. So there's a lot of things. That's why I picked high water pressure, because not a lot of people think about it, but there's a lot of things that can be tied back to high water pressure. Every single house that we go to, we're testing the water pressure to make sure that it's not too high. Now, for our customers on well water, it's not so much of an issue. This is mostly going to be for people on city or municipal water.
Especially in hilly regions, because in the hilly regions, they're going to pump through booster stations. They're going to pump to try to get the highest level of your city, you know, whatever your municipality is, to have that acceptable margin, right? Again, 68 PSI. So they're targeting that at the highest region of the city, but then the lowest region, because water gains a half PSI or a PSI for every, a half PSI for every foot. There we go. I almost went backwards, because it gains a half PSI for every foot. Your water pressure starts to rise dramatically, especially out west, where I'm from Washington State originally. And out west, where we've got some really hilly regions, we can see 40, 50, 60 feet or PSI of rise from the highest level to the lowest levels of a municipality, because it's fallen downhill.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So that's how like skyscrapers work too. Like the big, you know, I'm not in a big city. We're kind of in the suburbs, so we don't deal with it a lot. We mostly focus on residential anyway, but I've seen just big water tanks, especially like if you know, on the New York City skyline, you're watching movies, you'll see these big water tanks. Is that basically what they're doing? Is they're just pumping water into the tanks, and they're just letting gravity pressurize?
So I've actually done new construction on a couple of skyscrapers over the years, and yes, that is exactly what they do. They'll use boost stations, lift stations they call them, to bring water up to the water tower, and then they'll actually a lot of the lower levels are actually fed off of gravity from that tank down, and then they PRV them on the lower levels to make up the difference. They'll oftentimes use a constant velocity pump to kind of get you started, but at lower pressures, and yeah, it just builds as it comes down. The issue would be if you were trying to pump it up for usage without draining it down to usage, you would get very inconsistent water flow because of how much rise some of these skyscrapers get.
Cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. I always wondered how that worked. So for any new viewers that are in here tonight, just put your questions in the comments, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. I should see them here. Any questions plumbing related? This is mostly for homeowners, property management, landlords, people that own homes and are trying to figure out what's going on with their plumbing system.
It's the cheapest way to get access to the two of us.
It is. So another question came in from, it looks like, Joy. When would you repair a water heater instead of recommending replacement? Really, the quick answer is it depends on how old it is. If you know, the average life of a water heater is 8 to 10 years in my area in North Carolina. And, you know, is it worth repairing a water heater that's 10, 12 years old? It's your decision at the end of the day. All we can do is give you options. But if it was my home, I would recommend just going ahead and replacing that water heater brand new, get a new 6-year warranty on it, and just not spending money on a heater that's old. So it really kind of comes down to the age of the water heater
and your area.
Yes, and it does depend on what's wrong with it. You know, if it's a simple fix, and then it's not going to cost a whole lot, maybe you can get a few more years out of it. Um, if the heater is less than 6 years old, more than likely there's a manufacturer's warranty on it, so you wouldn't really want to replace it at that point. Try calling the manufacturer and see if they can send you the parts for free, and then get a licensed plumber to install those parts so that you can maintain that warranty.
Yeah.
Electric water heaters are usually less expensive to rebuild than gas water heaters. Um, let's say if you're talking about a tankless water heater, sometimes, you know, tankless water heaters, they last so much longer than standard tanked
With
water.
proper maintenance. Yeah.
Yeah, proper maintenance. You want to have them flushed. Both types of water heaters need to be flushed every year. But a lot of tankless water heaters, they can be repaired because it's usually, like we mentioned earlier, so many gizmos and gadgets on those things that it is something small that kind of goes haywire on it and just needs a simple replacement. At least that's what we hope. And you don't need a full water heater replacement for something like that. So it's really situationally dependent. If you have if you're wondering for your own water heater, put a little bit more info in the chat for us, and we can maybe help you make a decision on whether you should repair or replace.
And the lifespan of a water heater, just to pitch in, the lifespan of a water heater is so largely dependent on your area. The national average is 6 years, which is the reason why all those tank warranties cap out at 6 years, because that's the national average. However, you just said 8 to 10 years, I think. And on the glacial water that we have in the Northwest, where I'm from, we see 14, 15 pretty regular. Kind of 12 to 15 is kind of the sweet spot. And so it really does. It's going to depend on your area, you know, and somewhat how often you want to see a plumber, because once a thing starts getting older, right, you're going to start throwing parts at it more and more. And sometimes, though the tank could last a little longer, there's also that question of, do you really want to see a guy like me 3 times in the next couple of years before it finally dies?
That's true. Yep. So Darian, it looks like in the Facebook chat, if my house has periodic low water pressure, what could cause that? All right. Well, you kind of have two different situations here. You have people on well water and then people on city water. It could be totally different problems. If you're on well water, I would look at, well, you have a well pump system, you have a pump tank, you have a well pump itself. Filtration, is your filtration plugged up? You know, it could be as simple as just change out your filter because it's plugged up with sediment. If you're on city water, well, you could have a bad PRV. We talked about earlier, pressure regulating valve.
The diaphragms fail.
Yeah, those things can fail, and they can fail in both directions. They can either fail and you barely get any volume and pressure going through it, or they fail and they let way too much water and pressure go through it. If your house,
the other thing to throw out in there is the difference between pressure and volume. Most homeowners don't recognize the difference between pressure and volume, and the periodic low pressure would make me want to ask the questions of volume in my diagnosis, because pressure is how fast the car goes down the road. Volume is how many cars we can get going that speed. So sometimes you get periodic low volume or low pressure because you don't really have much volume. And so when you're running your washing machine and your dishwasher, and then you go hop in the shower, you're like, why is my shower so low pressure? Well, it's because you have a volume issue. You know, it's not actually a pressure issue. It's a volume issue. You actually don't have the volume to get that many cars going that fast. Cars being water in this circumstance. So I mean, that's another line of, question you kind of got to look at in it.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy there with the cars. Because, the way I always think about it is you can have really high pressure and barely have any water going through that. So if you take, a garden hose and then put a cap on the end of it and put a little teeny tiny hole in the tip, you're going to have a lot of pressure built up, but you're barely going to be getting any water through it at all. Or you have a 5-gallon bucket full of water and you dump it out on the ground, well, that's really low pressure, but it's a lot of volume of water. So
Correct.
they do kind of work synergistically with each other. They sort of depend on each other for different situations.
Yeah, because if we can't get whatever gallons per minute you're using, right, up to speed because we don't have big enough pipes or your pipes are clogged, right? A lot of times with old galvanized, this is really common with old galvanized houses to have that periodic issue because of low volume. And the issue is that the pipes have corroded, and how galvanized corrodes is it gets smaller and smaller and smaller in its interior diameter. And so as that happens, you're going to have substantial pressure at a fixture, but not at all your fixtures, or not consistently at all your fixtures if you're getting high demand times.
Yeah, definitely. If your house is old, and you have consistent low pressure and low volume, you probably have galvanized pipe, and you're looking at a repipe there. Upgrade to PEX.
But it can create the periodic issue too, because it's choking everything down so much if you're getting multiple points of usage.
Yep. Definitely. So, is there any way to increase volume if multiple things are running? I am on city. Well,
yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the situation. I mean, if you have galvanized pipe, then you're looking at a repipe. Multiple things running. Now you're talking about volume.
Or if it was plumbed incorrectly.
Yeah,
you need a repipe, because it could be undersized plumbing. Unfortunately, a lot of these, especially spec homes, the big contractor tract homes and all that, unfortunately, a lot of those, even newer, they were plumbed so cheaply that we see massive undersizing.
Yeah, I saw that today, actually. We call them vinyl villages, because they throw up a bunch of houses. They all got vinyl siding. They look pretty nice. They do. The inside of this house was beautiful as well, but they just had really low volume everywhere. And we looked at the PRV, and they were at 50 psi, which is pretty low, but it's not going to cause any issues. It just seemed like they had really low volume coming through the fixtures, and they didn't really want to mess with the PRV to try to crank the pressure up. They were pretty happy with it, but it's just one thing that I noticed. It just seemed like their fixtures. The house was only 5 years old, and the 2 lavatory faucets just had really low volume. And actually, one of the toilets, the fill valve was having trouble even cutting on. And I'm not certain if it was the fill valve itself or if it was the pressure being so low on the house. It could have been either one. But yeah, we definitely saw that today on one of these tract home neighborhoods where I believe the pipe was just undersized for the entire home. Yeah. I've also seen,
we had one that was a 4.5 bath that we had to repipe a few years ago. It was only a couple of years old, and it had a 3/4 inlet pipe. And so the whole house is being fed on 3/4, and a 4.5 bath. I mean, that should have 1.25 inches easily. But yeah,
distance is a huge factor too. Looked at a house one time. It was from the well to the home was 550 feet of water line, and it was 1-inch water line. And by the time it got all the way to the house, it just was really, really low volume.
Yeah, friction loss is real. Friction loss is very real.
Yeah, low volume and low pressure on that one, because like both said, friction loss. So let's see. Friction loss is basically the inside of the pipe slowing down the water. It's pretty much what it is. And the bigger diameter pipe you have, the further you can push that water without it slowing down. Is pretty much the easiest. What happened to my camera here?
It zoomed in on you.
Maybe I must have done some kind of like hand gesture and it was tracking that. I don't know.
Yeah, most people don't realize that water actually has friction just like any other substance does. We think of water as a lubricator, but really, in all honesty, water does have friction rubbing against other things. And so rubbing against the wall of pipe is no less. It actually reduces the velocity rubbing along the pipe, especially if you're talking flat or you're talking uphill on that pipe. You know, if the pipe's downhill, you're going to make that back up by your grade, right? And again, creating half PSI for every foot of elevation drop. But if it's flat, your friction loss is going to show up. You figured out how to zoom it up back out.
Yeah, I think I got it. Did I? Oh, I guess not. I don't know. Yeah, still look good, I guess.
The other thing I would want to check with intermittent if they're on a well is pressure tanks, and failed bladder in a pressure tank could show up as intermittent. And then I would want to go through things like their PRV and all that, make sure there's not sediment backing up against those things. We've had times where sediment settles back when it's not getting usage, but as it gets usage, it kind of piles back up against things like PRVs and valves, like shower valves and faucets and such. It's just that matter of that sediment moving. If it's heavy enough, it'll move back down and kind of release that blockage over time.
Yeah, that's true. And also, you don't see it as much, but even if you are on city water, you could still have filtration on your home, especially if you the home. There could be a filtration system you're not aware of. So there is that. In fact, I would recommend, I feel pretty comfortable saying, I would recommend filtration more for people on city water than well water.
For chlorine, yeah.
Yeah, there's some well water that's pretty bad, and you have to have filtration, or you're just going to have chocolate milk coming out of your faucets. But you know, I mean,
but generally speaking, well water is going to be natural things that will be aesthetically displeasing, but not necessarily unhealthy. Whereas inside city water, you're talking bleach. I mean, it's chlorine. That's bleach that you're drinking, and a charcoal will pull a lot of that out for you.
Yeah, and a lot of the other stuff too. I mean, we've heard the story about the types of things they've found in city water. So yeah, I highly recommend filtration for people in city water. At a minimum, you can do a reverse osmosis on your kitchen sink, and you can at least get your drinking water covered. But you also have to think about taking a bath in the water. You know,
or showering even.
Yeah, showering is actually one that I learned about recently. The bath is easy to understand because your skin is your largest organ, and it's like a big sponge. It's soaking that water in. But a lot of people don't think about when you're taking a shower, and we love our hot, steamy showers. Well, now you're inhaling that, and it's getting your lungs. That steam.
That's how Legionnaires became called Legionnaires, is because of it was a convention at a hotel, Legionnaires convention at a hotel, and that bacteria got in the water system, and through the swamp coolers and the hot showers, they ended up like making 1,000 people sick and almost killing a bunch of them too.
Wow. Yeah.
So, Legionella.
Yeah, and we'll hit on that for water heaters as well. You might actually know more about Legionella and water heaters, but
I've learned a thing or two.
For the showers, you can even get a simple shower head that filters the water as it comes through. I don't know how good they are. I haven't tested them, but I have seen them. So there's that option as well.
Any charcoal-based filter is going to be pretty effective, though it might not be 100% effective. It's going to be better than not have, especially charcoal bases, because they neutralize so many things. That I mean, I would confidently say that while they might not make it perfect, any filtration that's charcoal-based is going to have an improvement.
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely. So yeah, filtration on city water. And if you're the type of person that likes to drink water from a bottle anyway, so you're not really worried about it, well, I would think twice about drinking from a plastic bottle these days too, because it's like every time you turn around,
BPAs
else that is not good for us. But I would say probably the best thing would be reverse osmosis with a system that actually puts minerals back into it right before it goes into your glass. and the water tastes amazing. So,
oh yeah, those mineralization ones, they make the water taste just heavenly.
yeah, for sure. Well, hold on one second. Let me shut this door. It's my soundproofing door there. All right, so we do have some other questions that came through over the week. All right. So we have another one from Darian. I've got a drip on my kitchen sink. How can I get it to stop? Well, hey, we're already talking about water pressure, so I'm gonna hit on that one first.
Yes.
Check your water pressure on your home,
It's a
especially
very common cause of drips.
yeah, especially if it's not just the kitchen faucet that's dripping. Check to make sure that you're not above 70, 75 psi.
Yep.
What else would cause your kitchen sink to drip? Well, is it your faucet or is it your drain? There's two different types of leak
Oh, yeah.
we have there too. So, what do you think, Bo? Let's talk about the faucet itself.
I don't know. I'm kind of getting the image of a kitchen sink faucet. I guess I hadn't even thought of the drain at that time, but yeah, in the phrasing of the question, I guess I'm thinking of the faucet. So yeah, it'd be a lot of things on the drip of a faucet, but it all kind of stems back to the same issue. It's that there is a gasket material, whether it be ceramic or rubber or any number of silicone bases or whatnot, that is not seating all the way, whether it be a worn out washer or whether it be a piece of sediment involved or too much water pressure to hold back. So I think first thing that I would be doing is I'd fiddle with the handle and see if you can get it to alter by fiddling with the handle. And that's going to tell you about, if it just needs to be tightened up a little bit more versus something actually being replaced. And kind of that's where I would start, would be just fiddle with the handle a little bit to see if it alters it better or worse, and kind of start there.
Yeah, that's a good idea. If you can mess around with the handle and get it to stop in a certain position, you're looking at some type of cartridge,
yeah,
or seats and springs, some type of it's not an O-ring, but some type of rubber piece that's not sealing properly.
Some of them are O-rings, but that's going to be very dependent on which faucet it is. That's pretty broad spectrum. But yeah, the other thing that you could try is underneath your kitchen sink, you have a hot and a cold stop, and you could try shutting those off one at a time and seeing if it's your hot side or your cold side that's leaking, or if it's leaking from both. The only caution I will give you on those is those multi-turn stops. Oftentimes, once they start getting messed with, if they haven't been exercised on a regular basis, yes, that's the word you're supposed to use, exercise on a regular basis. Did you know, by the way, that those are supposed to be turned on and off every 6 months to be exercised, or else they will calcify? But yeah, it's nobody knows that, nobody does that. Generally, when you turn one off, it hasn't been messed with so long that it never works right. But if they're in good shape, you could shut one of those off and see if it stops it. And if it doesn't, then shut the other one off, turning it back on, and see if that stops it. And that could give you an indication as to whether it's your hot side or your cold side. And then the other thing to think of is this a two-handle faucet or is this a single-handle faucet? Because that kind of changes the equation a little bit as well. Yeah.
That's true. Some good answers there. All right, we have another question in the chat here from Facebook. What is this blue tank on top of my water heater for? So that's probably an expansion tank.
Expansion tank,
what you're looking at. Especially if you're on city water, then you're more than likely looking at an expansion tank. Basically, when, let's say you use all the hot water in your water heater, all right? Now, the water heater is full of cold water and it's about to reheat it now. Well, whenever cold water gets hot, it expands in volume. So that extra volume needs a place to go, okay? Because
or would damage things, yeah.
Yeah, because your water system is a closed system, so it's not going to go back to the city. Once it passes your water meter,
Well, and the reason why the reason why they're required now but didn't used to be is because it used to be that your old city water meters did allow back movement, but now
Mhm,
they don't because two reasons. There have been cross contamination issues, and we can get into that later as to why there are cross contamination issues. But then the other reason why is as we've gotten more water conscious as a society and culture, we've actually made our water meters so that they test at far lower levels. But the only way to do that is to increase the tolerances, tighten the tolerances, so they cannot backflow any pressure anymore. That's the reason why older homes didn't require them, but newer homes definitely need them. And not only newer homes, but older homes that are getting new water meters as your municipalities are replacing them.
mhm. Yeah, so
Yep.
these newer water meters, they don't let water go back. So once it passes your water meter, it's on your side. It's got to come out of somewhere. And whenever that cold water gets hot, it expands in volume. And if there's nowhere for that extra volume to go, then it's going to turn into pressure and it's going to
Mm-hmm.
increase the pressure throughout your entire system, which, like we talked about earlier, high pressure is bad. So,
Mm-hmm.
an expansion tank, imagine a water bottle with a balloon inside of it. The
Mm-hmm.
balloon's coming through the bottom of the water bottle. All
It's actually a
right.
really good analogy.
So the water stays in the balloon. Outside of the balloon and the rest of the water bottle is air pressure, and it's pushing down on the balloon. Water pressure is pushing onto the air pressure. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so what that does
And you're
is
supposed to match the air pressure with the water pressure, which, by the way, any of you that are listening to this, if you have a plumber install one and he doesn't put a Schrader valve on it or a tire pressure gauge on it and check it, you just know he needs to do that. He needs to pump it up
Mhm.
and match your city pressure.
Yep, exactly. So that
Mm-hmm.
expansion tank takes on that extra volume so that it doesn't increase the pressure in the rest of your system.
Yep.
So that was a pretty cool question there. All right, our
Yeah.
next question that we've had, this came in throughout the week. Why does my toilet keep cutting on and off even when nobody has used it?
Ooh. Could be high water pressure. It could be that your flapper valve has failed. And it's
Mhm.
just dribbling some water through it. It could also be that it's adjusted to too high of water level and it's running down your overflow tube.
Yeah, or the fill valve tube that's going
Mm-hmm.
into the flush valve could be too
Yeah.
far down in it, and it could be siphoning water into the bowl,
Yep.
causing it to repeatedly fill back
Yep.
up. So yeah, several things. First thing I'd look at is the flapper.
Yeah. It's the
If you
cheapest and easiest fix.
Yep, and if you haven't flushed the toilet in a while, take a flashlight and shine the inside of the bowl. You should not see any water moving down into the bowl. If you haven't flushed the toilet in 20, 30 minutes and you do see water trickling down there, then you know that something needs to be repaired. Probably a flapper, but it could be a several other things as well. But if you
And if
just
you
start
want
to
to
get your
test
eyes
it,
on it,
and if you want to test it, in a more visible sense, go to your wife's baking pantry, get her food dye that she has for baking cakes, and put some green or blue, especially those show up really well in the toilet tank water. Get it all good and blue, and then wait a second and see if you start getting blue or green streaks anywhere inside the toilet bowl.
yeah, that's all. That's an even better idea
Mm-hmm.
there. Definitely put some food color in the back of the tank, and it'll start to show up
Mm-hmm.
in the bowl. All right, we
Yeah,
got.
I used to with our plumbing company. I used to give our guys. It wasn't food dye, but it was a big bottles of dye that we always carried
Mhm.
that we used for all kinds of things to make it visible for a customer. Because you think about it, you got some guy you don't know telling you got to replace these things that are really expensive, and it's really hard to trust them. So if I can make a really visible illustration that a customer can see, it just helps the customer to trust us a little bit more. So we use dye a lot just to show customers there's all kinds of different things you can use dye for. We used to use a lot of dye. The only thing I'll warn you is that little quart bottle of dye. Don't ever let a guy spill it in your truck, because when you go to shampoo the seat, you can shampoo and shampoo and shampoo. It never comes out of the foam. Like every time you vacuum it. Side note.
Yeah, no, that's a really good idea. We'll probably get some dye on the trucks.
Yeah.
But I know, I can already see it now, that mess that is going to happen. All right, so we got another question from Justin. Why does my water look orange and staining my fixtures? So you're probably on well water, especially here in North Carolina. We have a lot of iron in the well water. I would guess that you probably have iron, maybe even some type of iron bacteria. A water softener is going to be the way to go for you to get that fixed.
If you're not on well water, the things that I would check secondarily would be failed glass liner on your water heater, meaning you need a new water heater, or it could be that expansion tank we talked about earlier. I've seen some of those rust, and as they rust, they'll deposit orange water into things.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, another thing I've seen from expansion tanks is I was at a house one time and they were getting, I mean, really the only way to describe it is what it was. Little tiny flakes of rubber was coming through their faucet, and I pinpointed it back to the expansion tank. The bladder in the expansion tank was like just degrading and falling to pieces and getting into their water system. Yeah.
I've seen a lot of them split, but I've never seen them like shed like that, I guess.
That's the only one that I've seen do that, and it looked like little pieces of balloon, like if a balloon exploded in tiny pieces. That's what it looked like.
I wonder if it overpressured somehow or something, because usually they'll just split. They won't shed in little pieces like that. They'll just get a big crack in them. I mean, and boy, do they do that. On the subject of expansion tanks, go tap your expansion tank. Everyone listening to this, because your expansion tank, about 90%, or not 90%, that's too high. About 60-70% of them are probably failed all the time. Like if you go, I mean, every time I go check one, it feels like every time, it's not, but feels like every time I go check one, it's failed. They fail a pretty high basis.
Yeah, and another symptom of a failed expansion tank is, let's say you turn on your kitchen faucet and it comes out really strong and then slowly dies off. And I'm talking about over the course of like 1 to 2 seconds. It could be a PRV, but also I would take a look at the expansion tank, because what that is your hot water just was created, increased the volume, pressurized, it overpressurized your plumbing system. Whenever you open that faucet, that's bleeding that pressure back down.
Sure.
And then it goes back to normal.
Hopefully that answers Justin's question well enough.
Yeah, I would say he's probably on well water. We do see it a lot more frequently on well water. And
I
want to just
it could be a clay too.
Yeah, and I will go ahead and say a normal cartridge filter is not going to take care of the stains.
No.
It might make the water look more clean, but you're still going to get stains and you're still going to have hard water.
Yep.
All right, we have a question from Tammy. What can cause a smell when hot water is running? All right, so this is actually some of the first videos that I put onto YouTube, and it is it's hydrogen sulfide, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah. One of the sulfur bases. Yeah.
All right. So it's sulfur bacteria, and the byproduct that they put off is hydrogen sulfide. H2S is the chemical structure for it. That stuff, it likes to grow in your water heater, especially if it's a water heater that sits for a long time. Let's say you have a cabin and you don't go there for months at a time, but you leave that water heater heating up. It's just going to sit there stagnant, and that bacteria is going to grow and it's going to stink.
Water heaters are kind of a nasty thing. Like when you go to drain one out, I think if most homeowners knew what was in their water heater, it'd probably disgust them.
Yeah, I have another video where I flushed my water heater, and the stuff that came out is nasty. And I flush my water heater every year. Every year I get so much junk out of this thing. It's nasty. You'd be shocked at what comes out of these water heaters, and if you ever cut one in half, I mean, it's like 12 inches
sludge.
thick, the amount of sludge that's in these things.
Yeah. And it varies depending on what kind of water it is and, you know, where they're getting the water from. But what you got to remember is it's a perfect heat to remineralize a lot of things. It's also setting. So now we're creating a perfect heat for suspended minerals to remineralize. But we're also creating a perfect temperature for several bacteria to grow. Hydrogen sulfide being one of them, and Legionella being another.
Yeah, that's another thing is the Legionella. It does like to grow in a water heater. Some solutions for this, a temporary solution would be to, drain the water heater, dump like a gallon of hydrogen peroxide into it, and then fill it back up and let it sit for like 24 hours. That's not going to be a long-term solution though. Long-term solution would be there's this thing. It's an energized anode rod. It's called a Coro Protect rod, and it actually gets rid of that sulfur smell. I'm assuming the smell you're talking about is like it's a sulfur smell. It smells like rotten eggs.
And I mean, the incoming water, you address that. The incoming water, because what we're heating up and letting sit is the first thing to address. And you already mentioned that, but kind of in progression, we start by putting cleaner water inside of it, and then we go to the anode rod that you're talking about, because progression.
Yeah, you could, and by putting cleaner water, there's filtration systems that you can put on your water main that actually filter in hydrogen peroxide and chlorine as you use water. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I know for a fact that this kills the Legionella. I'm not certain if it would help with the sulfur bacteria, but if you were to put a booster tank on your water heater and crank that thing up to like 140 degrees, would that be too hot for this type of stuff to even grow in the first place?
That's one of the reasons why tank boosters are becoming so popular, which, by the way, I love tank boosters. I mean, we turn those things left and right in our plumbing company. A couple of things that I really like about them is you can crank your water heater all the way up, and all the way up, it is too hot for Legionella. I don't know about the sulfides, but it's too hot for Legionella. It's too hot for Hanta and for several other of the viruses that like to hang out in water. So now you're getting too hot for that. And you could just crank your water heater up all the way without a tank booster. Here's the downside. You might scald somebody and even kill people. There was a guy a few years ago, an elderly gentleman in the area that we lived in, that one of my competitors, fortunately it wasn't us, he asked them to turn it all the way up, and they did. And he was older and kind of had lost that strength, as older guys do. And when he was sitting on the edge of his tub adjusting his water pressure or water temperature, he tripped and fell in and didn't have the upper body strength to lift himself out, and actually died from exposure to the scalding water on his face and neck. And yeah, not the way I want to die. Thank you very much. So you can crank it all the way up, but now you're at risk of scalding people, whether it be burns or, I guess in extreme cases, even death. But what you can do is you can do a tank booster, which brings it back to acceptable margin, acceptable temperature, and so now you've reduced the risk of virus or of the viruses and bacterias. You've reduced the risk of scalding by putting a tank booster on it, and the real pro that a lot of people are in love with is that it gives you 30% more usable volume, because you're mixing down hot water. You never use water at the full hot temperature. You mix it down with cold water. So the hotter we make the parent source of hot water, the more usable water we get at a comfortable using temperature, because of the mixing back in of cold water. So it's like gaining 30% of volume on your 40 or your 50-gallon water heater without putting a bigger water heater in, whether it be using your existing water heater or when you do a water heater swap, now you don't have to use any more space or the added expense of a bigger water heater.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
it's
the
really
75s
cool.
and 100s are not cheap water heaters.
Yeah, and you don't always have a spot to put them either.
Correct. Yeah.
But yeah, so
Yeah, because they're
essentially,
big.
yeah, they are. Yeah, but a tank booster, you're pretty much increasing the temperature of the water heater that you have, and then you're going to bump it back down as it's getting used. So increase it to 140 degrees or so, and then as you're using it, you're going to add cold water back to that to bring it back down to about 120 degrees, and that's why it increases the amount of usable hot water that you can get. So
Okay.
yeah, they're pretty cool systems.
Yeah. Yeah, we love them.
We have some more stuff on Facebook. What is the best way to replace cast trunk live to an existing new a cast trunk line to an existing new PVC? Okay, so we're looking at hold on. He also added some other stuff. Why do most commercial plumbers never install standoff or commercial toilets on urinals? All right, we got two different questions here. Let's address the cast trunk line to an existing PVC. All right, so
if you're removing cast, the first thing is go to the gym, do a workout because you're going to need to be in good shape for it.
yeah, especially if it's a stack.
Yeah,
it's
4
not
inches, 100 pounds every 3 feet, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact weight, but it sure feels like it. And then you start adding.
I think 4 inches, 100 pounds every 3 feet.
Yeah, and that's 3 feet of pipe. We're not talking about a Y
Fittings
that has a 45 leaded into it. And yeah,
and lead is kind of heavy.
Yeah, and also go ahead and get you a bunch of Diablo metal cutting blades because you're going to be burning through those things too. But
yeah, if you don't have a snap cutter available, yeah,
the best way to replace, I mean, you want to, all right, so you want to cut the cast iron out in a way that you can get a fitting back onto it. Like you don't.
So is he trying to replace into a Y? Is that what he's trying to do? Or is he trying to replace onto the pipe? Into a fitting or onto a pipe?
The best way to replace a cast trunk line to an existing new PVC. Well, in short, you're going to use a banded coupling.
Yep. Yeah, shielded coupling of some sort.
Go to Ferguson or your local plumbing supply and ask for a banded coupling to go from cast.
Do not use a Fernco, just a rubber coupling. Do not use that. It will sag and you'll get a misalignment and it will create clogs, like for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I've also seen them blow up like balloons as well if you get a stoppage. Basically, what we're talking about is don't get just a Fernco. They sell a different style that's basically the Fernco rubber coupling, but it has a metal band around it.
It goes all the way around it and shields it.
Yep, a shielded band is another thing that another term we use for it.
Yep.
Yeah, you're going to want to connect using a shielded Fernco, shielded band, banded coupling. They'll know what you're talking about at the supply house. And you just want to cut it in a way that you can get that thing back on there. You're going to want about 2.5 to 3 inches of good pipe to be able to tie back onto. And then
and that's where he says like the Diablo, or if you can get a grinder and a cutoff wheel in there, or if you can get your hands on a snap cutter, those work really well. I've seen guys try to like hammer chisel around on it, and you're never going to get a clean enough edge to get a good seal with a banded coupling. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, a Sawzall with a Diablo blade, they work pretty well.
Yeah.
And then if you can get a grinder in there, those work pretty well too. They're just a little bit more tedious.
And you need to be a little bit better at what you're doing with a grinder, because it's really easy because you're going to cut around it. And so your chances of tracking and not aligning once you get to the other side are pretty high, unless you're pretty good with a grinder and a cutoff wheel. Sawzall blade allows a full pass-through cut, so your chances of getting a pretty square cut are a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. Also, the section that you're going to be cutting out, maybe use banding iron, strapping iron to like support it. That way, when you're done cutting it, it doesn't just drop and fall off.
Yes.
Kind of
Or
basically,
cut it pretty near a strap that's existing, but yes.
yeah, because you don't want that stuff's heavy. You don't want it to like pin you down or something. I mean, it happens. So the next question from Tony, Bo, you might know better. Oh, sweet. So I can actually put these on here. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So why do most commercial plumbers never install a standoff on commercial toilets or urinals, knowing that people use their feet to flush the toilet? I definitely use my foot to flush a commercial toilet.
And a standoff is really a great idea. Tony, I hate to say it, but the real reason why is because most commercial plumbers are on a very tight budget. The problem with the construction industry in the U.S. is according to the Federal Trade Commission, again, the business side of it's kind of where I spent my last couple of years. The Federal Trade Commission says that the construction industry in the U.S., and this is all trades, but the construction industry in the U.S. runs at about 5% margins. And the Federal Trade Commission also says that you're not a profitable business if you're not beyond 20% margins. So they're all living on a shoe thread, and that extra $3 or whatever standoff costs, to get a chrome standoff, and they do exist, by the way. That extra $3 to $6 or whatever they cost done over the course of all of them in the building would add up and might eat too much into their margins. So while I think they probably should, it'd be a great idea to, it also would add expense that probably just isn't in the budget to do. I hate to say that quality is truly and honestly getting sacrificed over budget, but that is what it is.
Yep, definitely trying to save some money for themselves and save money for the customer, even if the customer doesn't know it. All right, so it looks like Tony has an answer with what he did here. He replaced the old trunk, and put a new fitting with the Y. It doesn't look like you used a no hub, which is another word for the banded couplings. Well, I hope it was easy for you, man. Those things can
What did he use?
I'm not sure.
Oh.
I'm sure he'll show me some pictures of it when I go to the gym. He works at the gym.
Okay, yeah.
He works at New Millennium in Mebane. Really cool guy.
Yeah.
And if anybody needs any plumbing work done on their pools, Tony is your guy.
Nice.
All right. Well, that's all the questions that we have right now. And we've been live for about an hour now, so
yeah,
I think it's time to log off anyway. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Bo, thank you for helping me out today on our first live stream. I think it was a pretty good one. We had a lot of questions come through.
Yeah, good questions.
And for anybody that's seeing this in the future after we're live, I hope you enjoyed it. For any questions you have, you can go to my website and submit a question through there. You can also message us on Facebook. That would be the best way to do it, honestly. Go to the website or send us a message on Facebook. And what I'll do is I'll get you on the next live stream. And if I do have your email, I'll clip it and send it back to you. That way you get the answer without having to watch the entire next one.
I like it.
Well, all right. We'll be back here Wednesday of next week at 7:30. I'm going live every Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So just write your questions down or submit them, and we'll get them answered for you. And I appreciate everybody for being here. I'll see you later.